One of the most renowned and influential civilizations of the Western world is ancient Greece. However, most of us are only familiar with a few prominent aspects of Greek civilization, such as Greek mythology or famous philosophers. So, what other fascinating elements does Greek civilization have to offer? Welcome to the Dreamy Nights audio story channel. We wish you a peaceful time listening before sleep. Ancient Greece developed around the vast and fertile Thessalian plain in the north, as well as the Attica and Pefki plains in the central region. People settled there and built one of the oldest civilizations in the world. Unlike other civilizations, Greece's rugged terrain, heavily divided by mountains, led to the formation of many smaller cultural regions, each with its own unique characteristics in language, culture, and identity. Nevertheless, Greeks were aware of their shared traits across regions and city-states. Despite this, the geographical fragmentation and weak regional connections meant that Greece was never unified under a single native government. For thousands of years, local Greek powers frequently clashed, shaping significant events in Greek history. As villages developed, the Greeks gradually built large city-states, usually located in valleys or plains, which became political power centers. Geographically, the southern Peloponnesian Peninsula was divided into 7 major regions: Achaea, Laconia, Messenia, Elis, Arcadia, Corinthia, and Argolis. Central Greece had 8 regions including Aetolia, Acarnania, Locris, Doris, Phocis, Boeotia, Attica, and Megaris. In the north were Thessaly and Epirus, and farther north lay Macedonia, split into Upper and Lower Macedonia, both strongly influenced by Greek culture. However, northern Macedonia was inhabited by non-Greek-speaking tribes, often leading to cultural conflicts with Greek civilization. The Greeks used the term barbaros to describe those who didn't speak Greek. Mountainous terrain made land travel difficult, prompting the Greeks to rely on boats for transportation and communication. The Greek seas were dotted with thousands of islands between 1,000 and 6,000, but only around 200 were inhabited. Among the most famous is Crete, home of the ancient Minoan civilization. Islands to the west, like Kos, served as links between Greece and southern Italy and the wealthy island of Sicily. Despite their rudimentary ships, the Greeks were able to explore and reach distant lands. Greece's diverse geography and mild climate, with little rain or snow in winter and spring, were shaped by ocean winds that occasionally brought rainstorms. The land was rich in minerals, and though mountainous, it supported agriculture through farming and animal husbandry. Olive trees, which later became a symbol of Greece, were especially prominent, along with vineyards and various grains. The Greeks also developed a strong handicraft industry, mastering bronze casting, iron forging, and metalworking. Other common trades included weaving, pottery, jewelry making, and ceramics production. Due to limitations in land, the key factor that enabled the Greeks to thrive was trade. In the late Bronze Age, Greece entered a phase of early globalization, becoming one of the 5 most powerful civilizations around the Mediterranean. During this time, they established colonies from Spain to the Black Sea. In addition to fishing, they exported wine, oil, and pottery, while importing food and luxury items. Greek society was characterized by a distinction between free citizens and slaves, different roles for men and women, minimal social stratification by birth, and a strong emphasis on religion. Only free men had the right to be city residents and receive full legal protection. Despite this, there was little inequality among free citizens, as Greek city-states generally had egalitarian social structures. Slaves, however, had no political rights, although they could own property and have families. Slavery was widespread, making up about 1/3 of the population. Unlike modern colonial slavery based on race, Greek slaves came from prisoners of war, kidnapping victims, debtors, or those sold by their own families. Greek slaves could be either native Greeks or foreigners and occasionally lived better lives depending on their master's treatment. Greek clothing is often imagined as long white robes, but the famous toga was actually Roman. Ancient Greeks typically wore a chiton, a tunic fastened at the shoulder, worn by both men and women, usually made of linen or wool and secured with decorative pins and belts. Men's tunics reached the knees, while women's extended to the ankles. Another garment, the peplos, was a rectangular cloth folded at the top and worn over the body. Sandals were common footwear, and jewelry made of gold, silver, or gems was worn during festivals. Greek law granted full legal rights to land-owning men born in the city-state. Women, on the other hand, were mainly responsible for domestic duties, managing households and raising children. Education was highly valued in Greek culture. For many years, education was informal and private. Poor families taught their children themselves, while the wealthy hired tutors. During the Hellenistic period following Alexander the Great's death in 454 BCE, private schools began to emerge. Boys were taught reading, writing, literature, poetry, and music, and in some places, military training, most notably in Sparta, where boys began their military education at age 7. Girls in ancient Greece were also taught reading, writing, and mathematics. However, unlike boys, they did not receive education beyond childhood. Some slaves in Greek society were trained specifically in education and were called pedagogoi, who were responsible for overseeing children's learning. As formal schools began to emerge, Greek teachers typically ran classes in private rooms. Prominent private schools included Plato's Academy, founded by the philosopher Plato, and the Lyceum, founded by Aristotle. At these institutions, students not only engaged in intellectual training, but also participated in physical activities such as wrestling, running, discus throwing, and javelin. Education generally ended at the age of 18, after which students entered military service for about 12 years. Later, they could either continue serving in the army or take on civil duties, with some of the wealthier individuals entering politics. In the evenings, some men hosted wine parties at home, where they discussed various issues. Education was considered vital for intellectual development and seen as a form of mental exercise. Socrates, Plato's teacher who greatly influenced world history, believed that mathematical debates served to sharpen communication in political life. He also thought that reading could harm memory. Plato, however, believed mathematics and debate were essential tools for studying philosophy and preparing for political life. In warfare, the Greeks favored the phalanx formation, where heavily armed infantry formed tightly packed shield walls with spears pointing forward. Battles between city-states were often decided by the clash of phalanxes. This tactic was later enhanced by King Philip II and his son, Alexander the Great, who introduced the sarissa spear, 5 to 7 meters long, twice the length of traditional Greek spears. The phalanx was effective in intimidating enemies and countering cavalry, which was less useful in Greece's rough terrain. A significant limitation was the logistical strain faced by city-states, often leading to wars being decided in a single battle. This began to change after the Greco-Persian Wars, when city-states started forming alliances. Naval warfare and strategies of attrition and blockade grew in importance. Naval power became politically influential, allowing city-states to both attack and defend effectively. The Greeks favored the tactic of ramming enemy ships with one popular maneuver called the diekplous, which involved penetrating enemy lines with triremes, then turning back to strike vulnerable points. Another tactic, the periplus, used superior speed to circle the enemy formation and strike at the right moment. Among the Greek city-states, Sparta stood out the most, renowned for its astonishing military discipline and the formidable shield wall tactics of its soldiers. The Spartans placed great importance on their shields. Returning without one was considered cowardly and disgraceful. In contrast, another prominent city-state, Athens, had a much shorter military obligation of only 2 years. As a result, Athens focused more on building naval strength, supplemented by troops from its allies and colonies. Greek city-states, in general, lacked strong cavalry forces. Greek cavalry, known as hippias, was relatively small. For instance, Athens maintained only around 2,300 cavalrymen. It wasn't until suffering a major defeat against the Thessalians that Athens began developing a more mobile cavalry force, establishing a permanent unit of 200 men, 200 of whom were trained in archery. Only later did the Greeks implement cavalry charge tactics, with coordinated assaults by mounted units, replacing the more hazardous use of war chariots. Greek culture is renowned for its contributions to art, especially sculpture and architecture. Trade facilitated interactions with Eastern cultures, including India, leading to the emergence of Greco-Indian art, characterized by bright colors on pure white marble. Greek sculpture emphasized naturalism but was idealized, aiming to vividly express deep thoughts and emotions. Their compositions were harmoniously arranged and rich in detail. Classical Greek architecture is famous for grand temples and open-air theaters without domes. Another significant structure was the stoa, a covered colonnade used for markets and public debate. Greek architectural legacy became a symbol of classical art, profoundly influencing European thinkers and artists, eventually inspiring the Renaissance. Ancient Greek religion was polytheistic and highly localized, with priests often managing village or city affairs. Animal sacrifices, typically of cattle, sheep, goats, or pigs, were common offerings to the gods. On special occasions, large ceremonies were held to honor their chief deities. Besides priests, oracles also played a vital role in Greek religious life. The most famous oracle was the Pythia of Delphi, a priestess of Apollo. To be chosen as a Pythia, one had to be a native of Delphi, and selected from among the city's most respected noble families. Once chosen, the priestess dedicated her life to charity and religious duties. Originally, young virgins served as oracles, but after an incident of rape, the minimum age was raised to over 50. Despite this, they continued to wear virgin robes to honor their predecessors. The oracle would give prophecies only once a month, on a Saturday that coincided with Apollo's birthday. They operated only 9 months a year, as Apollo was believed to travel north during winter. Each year, the season of prophecy began anew. The priestesses and guests were required to bathe and purify themselves. Greeks from powerful city-states were given priority access, thanks to the oracles, which made Delphi both wealthy and famous across Greece. Greek literature and poetry hold an important place in the world's cultural heritage. The Greeks developed a complete alphabet of 24 letters, still used today. The most renowned epic poems of ancient Greek literature are certainly the Iliad and the Odyssey, based on folk legends about the city of Troy. The poet Hesiod, who lived in the 8th century BCE, wrote 2 major works: Theogony, recounting the generations of gods and heroes, and Works and Days, which delivered a simpler message about labor and daily life. Alongside epic poetry, lyric poetry also flourished, with famous poets such as Solon, Sappho, and Alcaeus. In prose, one cannot overlook the fables of Aesop. Drama was a dominant art form in Greek literature, especially Greek tragedies, which laid the foundation for world theater. The Greeks built grand theaters, such as the one in Megalopolis with over 40,000 seats, showcasing the art form's immense impact on Greek life. Greek drama reached great depth in its expression and portrayal of human psychology. Unfortunately, many plays were lost over time. For instance, Sophocles wrote 123 plays, but only 7 have survived after 2,000 years, the most famous being the Tragedy of Oedipus, which had a profound influence on later art. Alongside Sophocles, another great playwright was Euripides, who, like Sophocles, wrote many plays, though most are now lost. His works were inspired by mythology, often portraying extraordinary heroes as ordinary people in extraordinary situations. His plays questioned the gods and reinterpreted many mythological events. One of the most distinctive elements of ancient Greek culture was its mythology, one of the most famous in the world. Greek myths revolved around the 12 Olympian gods and earthly heroes, either demigods or mortals. The Greeks believed these stories were true accounts of their people's history, and used them to explain the origins of the world and natural phenomena. These myths often conveyed deep moral lessons, warning against arrogance and exploring themes like father-son relationships, generational conflicts, and the confrontation with destiny. Many myths focused on human figures and heroes. In fact, the English word hero originates from the Greek heros, meaning protector or guardian. Before writing, history was passed down through myths and epics. Once writing emerged, Greek history was recorded, notably by Herodotus, a great historian of ancient Greece, who traveled extensively to document the world. Regarding war documents and international affairs of the time, Herodotus was recognized as the father of history. However, he was also one of the earliest historians accused of biased historical writing, often favoring the Greeks. Another notable historian was Thucydides, author of the History of the Peloponnesian War, which chronicled the 27-year conflict between Sparta and Athens. Unlike Herodotus, Thucydides was a soldier who prioritized factual accuracy to provide future generations with a clearer understanding of the past. He is not only considered a pioneer of scientific historical thought, but also the father of political realism. Greek natural sciences, originally rooted in philosophy, later branched out into their own disciplines. Greek philosopher Thales, influenced by Egyptian and Babylonian knowledge, predicted solar eclipses. Pythagoras, another philosopher, believed in numerical harmony and formulated the Pythagorean theorem. By the 3rd century BCE, Alexandria founded. By Alexander the Great had become a cultural hub. Mathematician Euclid developed the theory of infinity and compiled mathematical knowledge, including his famous postulates. Archimedes laid the foundation for hydrostatics, mechanics, and principles like the lever and buoyancy, and designed defense weapons for cities. Greek medicine also advanced significantly with Hippocrates, who achieved major breakthroughs in clinical observation, disease classification, humoral theory, and medical ethics. His work became the basis for modern disciplines like neurology, surgery, emergency medicine, and orthopedics. Ancient Greek philosophy played a vital role in shaping Western intellectual history. Its vast system of idealist and materialist thought influenced the world for millennia. With a flourishing economy and the rise of democracy, Greek natural philosophy developed vibrantly, especially during the pre-Socratic era. Thinkers from Miletus proposed that a single fundamental element such as water formed the universe. Others introduced a peiron, an undefined metaphysical substance present everywhere. Democritus proposed that all matter consists of indivisible atoms. Heraclitus offered a dynamic view of reality, stating, "You cannot step into the same river twice," to illustrate the ever-changing nature of the universe. He, like earlier thinkers, believed in a fundamental substance, but he identified it as fire rather than water. According to him, the unity of the world lies in its constant transformation. Although many ideas emerged during this period, Western philosophy only entered a new era with the appearance of Socrates. The father of philosophy, Socrates, was a soldier who participated in the Peloponnesian War. He used his reasoning abilities to point out flaws in others' arguments and was willing to question everything. He inspired young men in Athens, teaching them to doubt, to be creative, and to engage in debate to sharpen their intellect. Ironically, Socrates was ultimately executed by the very rulers of Athens. After his death, his student Plato stood up in defense of him. Like his teacher, Plato became one of the most influential philosophers in history, shaping Western philosophy. His works, often in the form of dialogues, include the renowned Republic, which delves into the nature of justice and the concept of an ideal state. Plato's student, Aristotle, laid the foundation for physics, biology, metaphysics, logic, rhetoric, politics, and art analysis. His school, known as the Peripatetic School, earned its name from his habit of teaching while walking. In the arts, Aristotle was the first to distinguish between logical consistency in storytelling and the realism of a work. In politics, his political treatises made a significant impact by categorizing various forms of government from a theoretical perspective. His Nicomachean Ethics became a foundation for European theology and modern philosophy. Aristotle is often regarded as the founder of logic and dialectics, and his worldview shaped the European mindset for centuries. So influential was he that people referred to him simply as the philosopher. During the Enlightenment, many of Aristotle's scientific views were deemed outdated, but his influence on logic, ethics, and metaphysics remained undeniable. Alongside Plato and Socrates, the trio are considered among the most influential philosophers of all time. A brief summary of ancient Greek history. Greek civilization is believed to have begun in the 3rd millennium BCE with waves of migration from northern tribes. This period lasted 1,000 years, forming distinct tribal regions. The main groups included the Hellenes, the Ionians, and the Dorians, who inhabited the mainland and islands of Greece. From 1750 to 1050 BCE, the Peloponnesian Peninsula and mainland Greece were dominated by the Minoan civilization, centered in Mycenae and the island of Crete. With its strategic location and fertile land, Mycenae flourished and attracted attention and investment from neighboring communities. This was a hierarchical society with a slave-based system. After the decline of Minoan civilization, Mycenae rose to dominance. Though information is limited, it's believed they were ruled by a loose alliance of city-states, each governed by a king. The major cities were Mycenae and Tiryns, both located on the Peloponnesian Peninsula. Despite its decline, the Mycenaean civilization left a unique literary legacy, particularly through mythological works. Among the most famous are stories about heroes such as Perseus, Heracles, and epics like the Trojan War and Odysseus's journey. After the fall of the Mycenaean civilization in the 12th century BCE, Greece entered a dark age lasting over 3 centuries, marked by population decline, warfare, and natural disasters. Yet during this period, epic masterpieces like the Iliad and the Odyssey emerged, demonstrating ongoing cultural vitality. The advent of iron technology indicated strong economic development, alongside the gradual revival of trade. Around 800 BCE. At the start of the Archaic period, Greece experienced a population boom that led to the growth of cities and widespread colonization, resulting in the formation of many new city-states. These developments gave rise to alliances and treaties focused on trade, economy, and religion. Cooperation expanded, leading to regional councils that significantly influenced Greek history for the next half-millennium. Alliances often formed for mutual defense or to secure economic interests, and were sometimes established between distant city-states to avoid resource conflicts. To maintain power balance, councils would rotate between cities or be re-established entirely. Two of the most prominent city-states of this era were Sparta and Athens. Sparta featured a powerful infantry and a dual king system, supervised by a council of 28 elders. Citizens over 30 could join the central army. In contrast, Athens, located in the central Attica plain, developed aristocratic and executive councils, and eventually, under the reforms of Solon, evolved into an early form of democracy. However, Greek affairs were dramatically altered by the rise of a new Eastern power, Persia. In the 6th century BCE, Cyrus the Great founded the Persian Empire, conquering Egypt and many Greek colonies in Asia Minor. Under Darius the Farciarch, the city of Ionia revolted against Persian rule with Athenian support. After crushing the rebellion, Darius launched a campaign against Athens. Despite being vastly outnumbered, Athens achieved a decisive victory at the Battle of Marathon through clever tactics and advantageous terrain. This victory became a pivotal moment in ancient Greek history, proving that the Greeks could stand against the mighty Persian Empire. This victory also led to the failure of Persia's first invasion of Greece. In 480 BC, after suppressing internal rebellions, Xerxes, the son of Darius, launched the Second Persian invasion of Greece. A coalition of 11 city-states was formed to resist the Persians, led by the Athenian general Themistocles, who proposed intercepting the Persian infantry and navy at Thermopylae and Artemisium. Around 7,000 Greek soldiers marched north to block the Persians at the mountain pass during the summer of 480 BC. 3 major battles occurred over 7 days before the famous last stand at Thermopylae. For 2 days, a small force led by King Leonidas I of Sparta held the only path the Persians could use to advance south. On the 3rd day, a man named Ephialtes betrayed the Greeks by revealing a secret path behind their lines. Realizing they were surrounded, Leonidas dismissed most of the troops, keeping only 300 Spartans, 700 Thespians, and 400 Thebans to hold off the Persians. Most were killed, with only a few escaping. After the defeat at Thermopylae, Themistocles withdrew the fleet from Artemisium to Salamis. In 479 BC, the Athenian navy counterattacked and won a decisive victory in the Strait of Salamis. This triumph helped Athens gain prestige among the city-states and begin building an empire under the guise of the Delian League. Following Salamis, the Persian fleet lost its strategic advantage. The Greek alliance won another major land battle at Plataea, which ended the Persian invasion and secured Greek independence for over a century. After defeating Persia, Athens, under the Delian League, began clashing with the Peloponnesian League, led by Sparta. Concerned by Athens' rising power, Sparta started supporting rival city-states against it. The conflict escalated when Thebes attacked Plataea, a city under Athenian protection, prompting Sparta to intervene and sparking intense battles. This shocked the Greek world, as no third power was strong enough to prevent the 2 dominant city-states from going to war. Historians divide the Peloponnesian War into 3 phases. In the first phase, Sparta repeatedly invaded Attica, while Athens used its naval strength to raid the Peloponnesian coast. This phase ended with Sparta's victory at the Battle of Amphipolis in 422 BC, though both sides suffered heavy losses, including the deaths of their leading generals. They signed the Peace of Nicias in 421 BC, but it was short-lived. A renewed conflict broke out in 418 BC when Sparta clashed with Argos, an Athenian ally, leading to a decisive Spartan victory at Mantinea. Subsequently, the Athenian politician Alcibiades rose to power and persuaded Athens to launch a massive expedition to attack Syracuse in Sicily. Despite their efforts, the Sicilian expedition ended in disaster for Athens, when their entire force was annihilated in 413 BCE. This marked the final phase of the Peloponnesian War, during which Sparta, with Persian support, incited rebellions in Athenian-controlled city-states across the Aegean and Ionia. After decisively destroying the Athenian navy at the Battle of Aegospotami, Sparta forced Athens to surrender in 404 BCE. The war devastated Athens, which never regained its former glory, especially after the brutal rule of the 30 tyrants. In 371 BCE, Thebes, once an ally of Sparta, turned against them, defeating Sparta at the Battle of Leuctra, killing the Spartan king, and invading Laconia. These defeats weakened Sparta, and by 362 BCE, no single Greek city-state could dominate the others. A period of decline followed, and in 338 BCE, Greece was conquered by Philip of Macedon. His son, Alexander the Great, unified the Greek states, destroyed the Persian Empire, and expanded Greek culture throughout the East, founding a vast empire. However, Alexander's death in 323 BCE at age 32 led to internal wars among his generals. This era, known as the Hellenistic period, saw the spread of Greek influence, with developments in philosophy, science, and the military, and Greek colonization in eastern cities like Alexandria and Antioch. New alliances such as the Achaean and Aetolian leagues emerged, but continued to compete for power. Eventually, Greece was conquered and became a Roman province. Nonetheless, Greek culture influenced Roman economics and religion, especially in the Eastern Roman Empire, which came to be regarded as a Greek empire. Many Eastern Roman rulers were of Greek origin. After the fall of Rome, Greece was taken by the Ottoman Empire and endured a long struggle for independence, eventually entering the modern era.